Welcome to PSR's Virtual Gala. We're delighted to have you here. I'm Dr. Mike Martin, President-elect of PSR. I came to my work with PSR out of my concern about climate change, a concern that I suspect you share. I'm excited to serve as the future president of PSR to help advance PSR's vital work on both climate change and the abolition of nuclear weapons. This has been an incredibly successful year for PSR, and we're excited to share with you tonight our successes and our plans for the future. We're also excited to bring you two outstanding keynote speakers this evening, Ms. Ebony Twillie Martin and Ms. Nola Haynes. They're innovators in the field of climate change and arms control and international security. We're honored to have them with us tonight. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce our current president and chair of the board, Dr. David Drake, who will give you more details on our exciting program this evening.
Hello, and greetings to all across the country. I'm David Drake, physician and president of our national PSR. I send you a warm welcome from our board, our 22 chapters throughout the nation, our staff, and also greetings from Iowa, where my life partner Claire and I both live, in our chapter of PSR Iowa. Our chapters are from Seattle to Washington State to San Francisco and LA to Arizona, Colorado, Iowa, Wisconsin to Florida, and up and down the East Coast. PSR was founded with the mission to prevent the gravest threats to human existence. I'm proud to support our work to combat climate change and eliminate the threat of nuclear weapons. Our theme tonight is Meeting the Moment, New Solutions in a Time of Reckoning, a coming to grips with the time we live in. We have quite the evening planned for tonight, with special presentations including the co-director of Greenpeace, Ebony Twillie Martin. Greenpeace, as many of you know, is an organization many of us have supported for decades, having started 50 years ago as a protest to nuclear testing in 1971. Their mission statement includes bearing witness to environmental destruction in a peaceful, nonviolent manner, using nonviolent confrontation to raise the level and quality of public debate, and exposing threats to the environment and finding solutions. Our other special guest speaker is the West Coast Director of WCAPS, Ms. Nola Haynes, Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. It's a newer organization since 2017, whose vision is to advance the leadership and professional development of women in color in the fields of international peace, security, and conflict transformation. And one of our own PSR National's newest staff members, Mari Faines, who's the Director of Outreach and Communications, was chosen as Woman of the Month for November by WCAPS. Congratulations, Mari. I want to thank each of you for supporting this gala fundraiser and for those of you who can attend today. As we all know, this has been quite the year for all of us. Dealing with COVID, of course, with ongoing work needed to protect our environment and the very planet we inhabit, and to work together keeping in mind diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice as we recommit ourselves on a daily basis to the climate crisis and to abolishing nuclear weapons. In spite of these challenges, our national PSR has worked to increase grants, to support our programming and our chapters, to diversify our staff and board, to work towards becoming an organization that looks and acts more broadly in a world with new and deeper challenges. Special thanks to Cerise Murphy, our philanthropy director, and members of our gala committee, including Todd Sack, Mike Martin, and others. And thanks to our guest speakers. Of course, to our board members and their local as well as national and even national involvement, our local chapters and national staff. Our national website is ready for your review at psr.org, psr.org. So sit back and remember that tonight is a fundraiser. Please give as though the lives of us, our children, and future generations depend on it, because it does. Board member Todd Sack will lead our donation drive. Enjoy the evening. Take it away, Todd, and thank you.
Thank you, David. My name is Todd Sack. I am a physician in Jacksonville, Florida, a climate activist, and treasurer for PSR National. As a climate activist, I use the resources created by PSR staff to be able to write letters to the editor about climate change and to represent PSR when I speak at Rotary clubs, to congregations, and in college classes, or when I testify in Florida Senate hearings. PSR gives hundreds of volunteer health professionals like me, nurses, public health experts, and even physicians, the tools we need so that we can bring effective health voices to the debates on nuclear weapons and climate change. I wish to thank our wonderful sponsors for tonight's gala. Lumix CPA is a general business accounting and tax advisory firm with specialty skills for nonprofit organizations. That's Lumix CPAs. Thank you, Lumix. Creative Print Group is a comprehensive design, printing, and direct mailing company that specializes in environmentally responsible printing. Their website is creativeforms.com. Our Western North Carolina PSR chapter is a sponsor as well. Thank you, Creative Print and Western North Carolina PSR. Individuals who are sponsors for tonight are Gwen Dubois, Terry Fitzgerald, Barbara Holt Warren, Ellen Ferranti, Tom B. Newman, Patrice Sutton, Bob Gould, Todd Sack, Barbara Sharp, and Claire and David Drake. We would love to add your name to this list. Please help with your donation of $100, $500, or even $1,000 right now. Go to psr.org/gala and click the donate button to give your credit card donation, or find our P.O. box on that page for mailing us a check. That's psr.org/gala. Thank you.
Hi, this is Congressman Ro Khanna. Congratulations, Physicians for Social Responsibility, on your gala. I'm sorry I can't be there, but I just wanted to congratulate you. Thank you for the work you're doing on climate. Thank you for the work you're doing on making sure that we are moving towards a world without dangerous nuclear weapons pointed at each other. Thank you for your advocacy. You have done so much to help prevent a war in Iran and champion the JCPOA. As you know, I've worked hard with Senator Markey to make sure we're not investing in even new ICBMs. To modernize ICBMs makes no sense at this time, and I appreciate your work on that. I also appreciate the work you have done and continue to do to make sure we are not engaged in endless wars, to make sure that we are appropriately restrained and working on diplomacy, working on investment here at home. So congratulations on the gala. Thank you for your advocacy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lalita Surapanini. I'm a hospitalist at the University of Minnesota Medical School. I joined the National Board of PSR this year in January. I wanted to share a bit about my PSR story, and then I'll share some of the highlights of this year. In Minnesota, I spend most of my time away from the hospital working on legislative advocacy. Over the past 2 years, I've been involved in campaigns for electric school buses, clean cars rules, as well as renewable energy, amongst other climate policies that also benefit our health. So most of the past 2 years, though, I've been involved in fighting against the Enbridge Line 3 tar sands pipeline expansion in Minnesota under the leadership of our Indigenous communities. While I've been an environmentalist all my life, I only recently started working on policy and advocacy. I, like many, was focused only on individual actions for most of my life. But as the climate crisis got worse, it was very clear that individual actions alone were not enough. And this was never more clear to me than when I was in my residency. So I did my internal medicine residency in Cleveland. And, I would come home and when I looked out of my apartment window, on the left, I could see the hospital, and on the right, I would see a coal plant on the banks of Lake Erie, spewing smoke 24/7. And that's when I knew that I needed to do more than care for the patient right in front of me, and needed to do more than just live a green lifestyle. But I wasn't really sure what I should do or how I would do it. So my first step towards my advocacy journey was attending a PSR conference, and that's where I found my people. Shortly after that, I got in touch with Gwen Du Bois from the Chesapeake PSR chapter. Gwen gave me an opportunity to testify about the health impacts of air pollution of a local incinerator to the Baltimore City Council. And that was she also helped me understand how I, as a physician, could speak about health impacts of air pollution, and how I could play a part in shaping climate policy that centers health and health equity. And I'm so lucky to be part of the PSR community. Here are some highlights from PSR's work that I wanted to share with you. This year, we've released a groundbreaking report on PFAS, or forever chemicals, in fracking. This report was written by Dusty Horwit and funded by the Park Foundation. This received coverage in New York Times and 24 other outlets. But more excitingly, this report was cited by members of Congress and used by our allies in their advocacy. And through support from the Energy Foundation, the national office was also able to fund 6 chapters to work on expanding building electrification efforts at the city and state level. PSR also worked with our allies to secure extension of the New START treaty. Presidents Biden and Putin agreed to extend New START arms control treaty by 5 years. PSR also designed a new intersectional strategy for redefining security with health in mind. The resulting #DemandAccess campaign is rooted at the intersection of nuclear weapons abolition, decreasing military spending, and promoting access, equity, and justice for diverse populations. The launching of this new strategy is already underway. I'm so humbled and excited to be part of the PSR community. This past year, in August, PSR chapters across the country stood with Minnesota, stood with our indigenous communities against the Line 3 oil pipeline. This is a picture of a National Day of Solidarity action, which would not have been possible without PSR chapters across the country. So you can see here San Francisco Bay, Oregon, Washington, LA, Sacramento, Maine, Greater Boston, and Chesapeake PSR chapters participated in this day of action and asked President Biden's administration to stop Line 3. Next, you'll be hearing a piano piece by pianist Vivian Shao. She's also my mother-in-law, and she sends her gratitude to all of us working on securing our climate and our health. This piece is short and carefree, and she says it's sure to put a smile on our faces. Thank you so much.
Wow, Professor Vivian Xiao, thank you for that inspiring performance. Dr. Xiao spells her name S-I-A-O. The piece she played for us is George Gershwin's Piano Prelude No. 1, first performed in public by the composer in 1926, ironically also the year that physicist Robert Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, the predecessor to the tens of thousands of nuclear weapons ready to destroy human civilization this very minute. Hello again. I'm Dr. Todd Sack, a climate activist and treasurer for PSR National. The 17th century poet John Donne should have said, "No person is an island." Likewise, PSR does not work on its own. Everything we do is work in partnership with our hundreds of health professional activist members in 26 chapters, about which you'll hear more in a few minutes, and with the remarkable private foundations who support us. PSR wishes to thank these foundations that make our work possible. Plowshares, the Energy Foundation, the North Light Foundation, the Strongen Foundation, the Park Foundation, the Western Conservation Foundation, the Climate Action Campaign, Sierra Club, the High Tide Foundation, and Climate Imperative Foundation. Thank you. We would love to add your foundation's name or your own name to this list. Please help with your donation of $100, $500, $1,000 or more right now. Go to psr.org/gala and click the donate button to make your credit card donation, or find our P.O. box on that page for mailing us a check. That's psr.org/gala. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tanya Verkaitis, and I am the Executive Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility Pennsylvania, which joined the PSR family in 1979. For over 60 years, Physicians for Social Responsibility has mobilized physicians and healthcare professionals to advocate for climate solutions and a nuclear weapons-free world. With over 20 chapters across the country, PSR continues to protect human life from the gravest threats to health and survival. Though the chapters don't all share the same programs, which you will soon learn, like PSR Pennsylvania, they all promote socially and environmentally responsible practices, policies, and programs to safeguard and improve public health. The PSR chapters offer an expert voice of health to issues that affect the health of our bodies and our planet, locally, nationally, and internationally. We fulfill the mission of PSR through education, direct service, and advocacy on issues such as fossil fuel extraction, climate change, and energy efficiency, to name a few. It is this united vision that will create a healthy, just, and peaceful society for current and future generations. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Samantha Hernandez and I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I am the climate justice organizer at the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Hi, my name is Laura Dagley. I am a nurse and the medical advocacy coordinator for Physicians for Social Responsibility, the Pennsylvania chapter.
My name is David Spence. I'm the current board president of the Arizona chapter of Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Hi, my name is Karina Perez Europa. My pronouns are she, hers, ella, and I am the Clean Air organizer for Oregon PSR.
My name is Tanya Verkaitis, and I came on board as the executive director in January.
My name is Sean Tinney. I'm the associate director at Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Hi, I'm Barbara Donakai, board-elect of Physicians for Social Responsibility, Colorado.
Hi, I'm Tammy Murphy, the Medical Advocacy Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility in Pennsylvania.
Hi, I'm Anna Lanakis Baker. I'm the Executive Director of Greater Boston PSR.
My name's Max Zavashinsky, and I'm the Executive Director of Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Despite what will forever be known as the pandemic year, as an organization, we've managed to grow, going from Philadelphia and Harrisburg chapters to a statewide organization. This has allowed us to expand our engagement with healthcare professionals and impacted communities across the state.
Our past year has been one of stabilization of our fledgling chapter into a robust and effective organization.
This year, GBPSR's top climate accomplishments have been our successful advocacy with other groups around the serious health risks of biomass, particularly in environmental justice communities, which resulted in the Department of Environmental Protection pulling the permit for the Palmer biomass plant in Springfield, Massachusetts.
This year, we've been working harder than ever to mobilize health professionals to lean on our local electeds and decision makers to address the gravest threats to health.
Today, we want to share some of the successes of the last year, which includes creating a grassroots campaign to shut down Marion County's polluting trash incinerator and mobilizing health professionals to speak out against crude oil and frack gas.
So 2021 has been an extraordinary year of opportunities for health professionals and other SF-Bay PSR members to amplify our voices and grow in our efforts in support of climate health, environmental justice, and the abolition of nuclear weapons locally, nationally, and globally.
We've done a fair amount of climate activism this last year. We sponsored and promoted the rooftop solar installation through a solar co-op here in Arizona, and this collaboration has resulted in 90 homes getting rooftop solar in the last year.
Our work with allies led to the unanimous passage of the Berto update in the Boston City Council in September. Large buildings in Boston account for 60% of its total greenhouse gas emissions. The update will require buildings larger than 20,000 square feet to be net zero by 2050. In terms of potential carbon emission reductions, this is the most important climate mitigation ordinance that Boston has ever passed.
So PSR Colorado became a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the city and county of Boulder to stop the connecting trails between the Rocky Mountain Greenway trail that runs through the plutonium contaminated Rocky Flats buffer zone and the bike trails and connect to the bike trails in Boulder.
In support of the mission of the Park Foundation, we conducted an assessment of radiation exposure to communities in proximity to the unconventional gas development industry.
Our chapter has been part of a cancer crisis coalition in southwestern Pennsylvania. This coalition was formed when dozens of children and young adults were in the 4-county area were diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma and other rare cancers. So our coalition includes other community groups and impacted residents that are concerned that this increase is linked to the heavy oil and gas infrastructure in the region. It was pressure from this coalition that led Governor Wolf and the Department of Health to announce that they were spending $3 million on a pair of studies to explore the health impacts of the natural gas industry. Since that announcement, we have worked to hold the administration accountable to this promise, to ensure the studies include radioactive waste streams and to facilitate communication between impacted communities and the Department of Health.
WPSR, through its climate and health program, led by our organizer, Nick Manning, was a proud advocate for recently passed legislation that makes our state a climate leader, notably through the Climate Commitment Act, which created a cap and invest program to limit and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in programs and projects to reduce emissions, expand clean transportation, improve climate resiliency, and reduce air pollution in already overburdened communities.
Lastly, our work in building electrification has been primarily as leaders of a group called Here for CJ, which hopes to provide a thorough case for why electrification and home repairs is critical for the health, environment, and economy of Philadelphians, and also to design an equitable and just framework for housing repairs and electrification that can be used to develop and assess projects to make the case for healthy home repairs and equitable electrification.
On the nuclear front, we have a state level back from the brink resolution pending, Senate Bill 1566, and 6 Boston City Councilors have signed on to a letter to Biden and Congress endorsing Back from the Brink. With the Massachusetts Medical Society, we have co-sponsored a course entitled Nuclear Weapons, a Public Health Issue.
We've been active in nuclear weapon abolition, and our members in Tucson participate in the weekly protests at the Raytheon Missile Development Plant. We do this in conjunction with other peace organizations.
We supported formal letters to Presidents Biden and Putin, asking them to reduce the threat of nuclear war, including a very recent letter with over 300 national signatories delivered both to the President and Congress. We, of course, participated in Back from the Brink, a campaign to urge the adoption of measures such as no first use and no sole presidential authority, and advocated for local resolutions with work in Berkeley, Arcata, and San Francisco.
We also participated in a vigil commemorating the same of our commitment to eradicate nuclear weapons. And it took place in downtown Asheville on August 6th of this year.
Washington is home to the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the hemisphere. It's the home state of the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. It's home to Hanford, the country's largest nuclear waste Superfund site, where the fissile material for the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs was produced, and home to Native American tribes and large Asian Pacific Islander communities that have been victims of the legacy of nuclear weapons production and testing. Thanks to the work of WPSR's Nuclear Weapons Abolition Task Force, led by our newest staff member, Tara Villalba, and the Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition, Washington has also been a leader in the nuclear abolition and nuclear justice movements.
Although we have successfully accomplished so much, there is still so much work to do. OPSR is looking forward to continuing to build on our successes in blocking fossil fuel infrastructure in our region. We are hoping to eventually close the Zenith facility in Portland, for example. We are also working to close the Marion County incinerator for good and advocate for zero waste policies.
In the coming year, we will continue to work at the state and national level to push not only for the abolition of nuclear weapons, but for sane nuclear policy and for justice for those who have suffered and continue today to suffer the health and other associated impacts of nuclear weapons production, testing, and usage.
Going forward, we're hoping to garner more support from elected officials to endorse Back from the Brink. And we hope to continue our progress ridding some of the most polluting fossil fuel sources from our region while supporting clean energy options that create healthier living circumstances for all communities.
We are going to participate in International Physicians for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons.
Looking ahead, we will continue our tenacious fight against fossil fuel infrastructure in Washington, focus on promoting building electrification initiatives throughout the state, and continue to push for climate solutions that address pernicious environmental justice issues and climate-related health disparities.
Going forward, in April of 2022, we will present a webinar on radioactive waste from Rocky Flats and the epigenetic and other health implications. We're planning for a third fracking conference, and we're focused on expanding our climate justice work with ally groups. We're improving our climate and justice social work with infusion of new and highly experienced board members as well.
We have been busy this year, and we invite you to check out our website and support us in any way you can, gbpsr.org. Thank you.
Physicians for Social Responsibility of Western North Carolina encourages and invites your support for our national organization. You can make a donation at www.psr.org. Thank you.
For all these reasons, we need all the engagement and support we can get. So no matter where you are or what you do, there's a place for you at WPSR. Please join and support us today at www.wpsr.org. Thank you for your support of PSR and doing all you can to address the gravest threats to health. Have a great night.
Good evening.
evening. My name's Joy Blackwood. I serve on the National PSR Board and several of our leadership committees. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of introducing someone we all admire and have been working with for many, many years now. Ebony Twilly Martin is the new co-executive director. Sorry, I was going to say co-chair, but she's the new co-executive director of Greenpeace USA. She serves in this role alongside of Annie Leonard, but we are all within the environmental conservation and science-based world are so delighted that Ebony is leading one of our major greens, one of our major conservation groups and environmental groups. This was an historic move for Greenpeace USA in appointing Ebony to the co-executive director role. And we all celebrate, as I said, and we have, many of us I know, share some wise words of wisdom and ways for all of us to continue to do our work, continue to fight the fight, and continue to make sure that all that we do is fighting for justice, diversifying our movement, our sector, making things really equitable. And of course, we must always be inclusive. And with that, I will pass the mic to Ebony. Have a good evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be with you, albeit virtually. I'm grateful to be connected with scientists, activists, and medical professionals who understand and see the importance of the moment we are in now with the climate crisis. As a matter of fact, a physician is one of the reasons why I'm at Greenpeace at this critical moment. So I want to talk with you about my journey as a mom and as an environmental activist and the change that we together can make toward a more green and peaceful future. For me, the impacts of the climate crisis came knocking on my door about 14 years ago. As a single mom, I had gotten in from a long day at work and had just gotten my 3-year-old son ready for bed. He had a bit of a recurring cough, but I thought that was normal for a toddler who was in daycare. After putting him to bed for the evening, I sat down to try and catch up on a few work emails. It wasn't unusual for me to hear faint coughs from his room as he slept, but this evening, the coughs grew gradually louder. As a mom, you can sort of get a premonition when something isn't quite right. So I went into his room to check on him, and he seemed to be sleeping through the coughing fits, but something else caught my attention. The way he was breathing. His breathing sounded raspy, like he was wheezing, and there was a wispy, heavy sound coming from him with the rise and the fall of his chest in every breath that he took. Although he was sleeping, his breathing was clearly disrupted, and I sat there nearly the entire night, watching him, terrified that he might struggle even more. With any other sickness, like a fever, you give your child Tylenol. But what medicine is there to help your baby breathe? I urgently called his pediatrician in the morning. At the time, we were living in Landover, Maryland. Black and brown communities in Landover, Maryland live amid the intersection of the Washington, D.C. Beltway, I-495, and Route 50, which takes folks to the beaches and crab cakes of Maryland's Eastern Shore. This intersection is further split by Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, a primary local road. And this is where I landed as a newly divorced single mom with a 3-year-old son, in an apartment building directly situated in the middle of all that traffic. What I later learned that my son developed asthma from the car and truck exhaust within a few months after we moved there. And I never even saw it coming. When I brought my son to the pediatrician so that we could get his breathing issues figured out, I figured she'd ask questions like, does asthma run in your family? And what breathing conditions have you had? What I didn't expect her to ask was, where do you live? Are there trees and grass? I had thought asthma was hereditary, but my son's doctor instead pointed to pollution in the environment as a probable cause. As I began to research, I found that Black children are disproportionately impacted by asthma. In fact, Black people are 40% more likely to have asthma and nearly 3 times more likely to die from it than white people. Further, Black children in the United States lose an estimated 101,000 school days annually dealing with the impacts of asthma. This is directly linked to the impacts of the production and usage of fossil fuels. My child, like far too many others, was subjected to living in an area that caused him to breathe air full of toxins and pollution, because unfortunately at the time, I didn't have the money to just pick up and move. We all know that the climate crisis is the biggest existential threat to humanity. But not everyone realizes that the number one driver of the climate crisis is the burning, drilling, and expansion of fossil fuels. You know what that means? Fossil fuels are a public health crisis, causing the most vulnerable among us to bear the impacts. Of course, there are other factors that contribute to climate change, such as deforestation, methane emissions, and land use. But by far, the single biggest contributor is carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels. A recent study by Harvard University found that worldwide, 8 million premature deaths were linked to pollution from fossil fuel combustion, with 350,000 in the US alone. When my son was diagnosed, I asked the questions that every parent would ask. How do I change this? What should I do? The science and data show a clear connection between racism and the exposure to environmental hazards and pollution caused by fossil fuels. And that led to my journey in environmental activism. And here I am. Once I learned how to treat the asthma, I began to take a closer look at the industry that was causing my child and so many others harm. I wanted to know, how could this exist? Well, I'll tell you how. In 2020 alone, the oil, gas, and coal industry spent more than $115 million lobbying Congress in defense of fossil fuel subsidies. Currently, the industry receives $15 billion of our tax dollars in federal subsidies every year. All told, that amounts to a return on investment of over 13,000% for these corporations. So you see, our government gives billions of our tax dollars to finance this corrupt industry. We also clearly see the billions of dollars in profits that oil executives and lobbyists rake in and take home at our expense. We see the millions of dollars these companies spend in PR campaigns to spread disinformation and lies about the harmful effects of coal, gas, and oil, while we watch in real time as our children, our families, and Black and brown communities suffer. A 2021 report by NRDC found that the health costs of air pollution and climate change already far exceed $800 billion per year. I know the expenses that I incurred to make sure my son had what he needed to treat his asthma. I know the angst of having to put your child on a nebulizer 3 times a day. I know the angst of having to fight the insurance companies for enough albuterol to treat your asthmatic child. And I know the paralyzing fear of watching your child gasp for air. And I feel the heartache and outrage knowing that this industry and our government has let me down. But I decided that I could not and would not allow my child and others to be victimized by this toxic industry. Not on my watch. And this is why I joined Greenpeace, the largest global campaigning environmental organization who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. I joined a community of supporters, volunteers, and activists who stand with me in saying, no longer will we stand for the lies from the toxic fossil fuel industry. No longer will we stand for fossil fuel racism and the legacy of historical injustices perpetuated upon us. No longer will we stand for the inaction and corruption of our government. This will not continue to happen on our watch. Like Bill McKibben said, we are not in an argument, but we are in a fight. We are fighting for a world beyond fossil fuels in which everyday people's well-being, health, and families come first. We are fighting for our children and our planet and our future. We are fighting for justice. And folks often ask, well, what does justice look like? Dr. Cornel West said, justice looks like love out in public. A world free of oil wells and refineries. It looks like our children playing in a green and healthy environment, running and laughing. And what does justice sound like, you might ask? It sounds like our children breathing and sleeping peacefully at night. And it's not until every child can breathe freely without an inhaler, and not until every parent doesn't need to be worried about their child's ability to breathe. We still have work to do. To achieve that, we know we have to advance clean, renewable energy solutions. But that won't be enough if we don't also ambitiously phase out fossil fuel operations. Continuing fossil fuel use cancels out the benefits of the advances in solar, wind, and other solutions. We recently saw a huge step forward in California, and PSR LA was at the forefront of this work. California has long been a pioneer in environmental protection and renewable energy, but until recently, California's leaders wouldn't take on the powerful oil and gas industry in the state. Well, just last month, California's Governor Newsom announced a precedent-setting rule to create a 3,200-foot health and safety buffer between oil and gas operations and neighborhoods. Once it goes into effect, the governor's announcement will prevent new wells from being drilled within 3,200 feet of sensitive sites, including homes, schools, playgrounds, hospitals, and most notably businesses. This is a precedent-setting victory. California went from being the only oil and gas producing state to have no health and safety buffer to having now the largest health and safety buffer in the country. California's most polluted neighborhoods are finally going to see some relief. This campaign victory was achieved through years of partnering with local environmental justice groups, including PSR LA, and activists like Nayeli Cabo, who at just 9 years old suffered from horrific nosebleeds from the pollution emanating from the oil site across the street from her neighborhood. This comes from years of fighting back and mobilizing mothers and fathers, communities and community leaders who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Those who watch their loved ones suffer from cancer, who are sick of their children being born with preventable deformities, who are sick of the headaches linked to the deadly and debilitating effects of fossil fuels. They decided enough was enough and that they wouldn't allow these injustices to happen on their watch. We must hold our government officials accountable to ensure that we have clean air, clean water, and a just future. We must demand change. We must organize our time, our energy, our efforts, and our resource to build power to continue standing up to this industry. We must do what the science and justice demands right now. And that is a complete and immediate phase out of fossil fuels, ensuring a just transition and that no community or worker is left behind. From the coal mines of West Virginia, where the coal miners still die from black lung in 2021, to the oil fields of California, the largest oil producing state in the country. We will not be victims. We will be victors in this fight. But it's easy to stand before you and tell you what has to be done. It's doing it. That's the hard part. We are all accountable for this planet, its people, and the work it will take to see ourselves out of this crisis. And how we support one another in the fight before us will be the real litmus test of our achievement. We are in a climate emergency, and if we are to avoid worst-case climate scenarios, we have to build the strongest, most diverse, and broadest coalition possible. And that's not an impossible task. From the history of transformative movements, we know that it only takes 3.5% of the population to actively engage for real change to take hold. That's 11.5 million Americans working together to collectively advance justice. Join us. Building this movement is what Greenpeace is committed to doing. And our movement is stronger because of organizations like PSR and Greenpeace. And the more we can work together, the more our strength will continue to grow. It's what I'm committed to doing for my son and for all children, for my community and for every community. Building a movement to win the future that literally so many are dying for, and we will die without. And we need you, the heroes, the doctors, scientists, activists, fellow working moms, fellow leaders. The future of our children, of our planet, needs you to stand up and tell the fossil fuel industry, not on our watch.
Ms. Twillie Martin, thank you for your powerful speech and your commitment to creating a world where our children and grandchildren can thrive. I now turn it over to Dr. Tove Fuller, who will introduce our next distinguished speaker.
Hi, my name is Dr. Tove Fuller, and I am so excited to introduce Nola Haynes. Nola Haynes is an adjunct professor of political science and international relations, teaching arms control and international security. Nola's research focuses on national security, foreign policy, and intersectionality, and particularly looks at potential domestic and foreign policy consequences of the 2017 and 2020 identity-based travel bans, which targeted mostly Muslim majority and African countries. Nola's interest in arms control and international security centers on emerging weapons of mass destruction threats in space, nuclear modernization, reduction, deterrence, and strategic planning. Particularly, Nola is interested in soft and hard deterrence tactics, such as preventive force and coercive diplomacy. In addition to researching and teaching in this area, Nola is an active board member on the Women's Caucus for the International Studies Association, communications team, and the Foreign Policy Board for the American Political Science Association. Adding to Nola's portfolio, she is active within the national security policy space. Nola is the director of Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security, the West Coast, and is an alumnus of the West Exec Advisors Mentoring Program. She is also a member of the Pacific Council on International Policy, working on a joint civilian-military initiative helping resettle Afghani allies. Lastly, Nola has extensive communications experience and is currently on the communications team for the Black Professionals in International Affairs. Nola is a unique scholar within the national security space because of her multiple intersections in policy and communications. Thank you for everything you do, Nola.
Hello, my name is Nola Haynes. Thank you so much, PSR, for having me say a few remarks on new solutions and meeting the moment. I am in awe of the mission of PSR, a U.S. affiliate of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. How awesome is that? 2 weeks ago, I had a great time on the nuclear abolition panel hosted by PSR. So thank you again for this invitation to deliver a keynote that may at times remind you of being a lecturer as an undergrad. So bear with me. I am an academic, particularly a political scientist. So before I move on, I'm going to give you a little lesson on the types of political scientists and where I fit. Type 1, the media rock stars, the Americanist. Now they look at congressional issues, data-driven domestic problems such as voting behavior following elections, just to name a few. Next, we have comparative political scientists. Now they look at large issues like democracies, regimes, and data-driven exogenous factors impacting countries, and they compare different countries. Then there's me. I am an IR person, or international relations political scientist, and we look at cozy things like war, conflict, power, security, securitization, game theory, and the role of decision makers, just to name a few. To unpack this a little further, I am a security expert, particularly national and international security, foreign policy, and arms control. IR folks like me go to bed thinking about things like, will we ever recover the Iran nuclear deal? And how do states, stakeholders, and decision makers refrain from repeating Cold War era mistakes? I'm going to start with a brief history primer. Again, bear with me, I am a teacher. Many of you may know that the United States under FDR did not enter World War II hastily. Just decades before, a promise was made after World War I of never again. The world and history had a different trajectory in mind for the once geographically and politically isolated United States. After the first bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945, the US began reshaping the anarchic and war-prone international community into a space of trade, relative peace, global coalition building, and cooperation through institutions, most notably, but not limited to, the UN. Now, this origin story, as the Marvel fan in me takes over, is brutally noble. What I mean is, in war, decision makers justify the loss of life, especially following a first strike like Pearl Harbor. What's missing from my positivistic account of the US's superpower origin story is the human factor. In other words, does war justify an incalculable loss of life? Does war justify generations suffering from radiation side effects? Does war justify rounding up expatriates and throwing them into internment camps? Now listen, I am no military strategist. I am no general, no colonel, no captain. I do not have a military background. Both of my parents are military, and I have a huge respect for military. Now, I do know a few of these types of folks, and what I can say is wartime decision-making has its own logic, which many of us civilians can never truly grasp. What I can grasp as an IR person are words in terms like securitization, deterrence, first strike versus second strike. Now, securitization is a fancy word for decision makers that goes like this. I said what I said, and I have the receipts to back it up. That's pretty much securitization. Deterrence is a concept and policy of sorts that says, don't start nothing, won't be nothing. However, the trick with deterrence is it's largely a guessing game, especially with nuclear proliferation, which in many instances is kept private and well hidden. First strike versus second strike is, in my opinion, the logical fear that keeps mutually assured destruction at the forefront of decision makers' minds, as it should. As I mentioned with the Pearl Harbor example, where over 2,400 people died, including 60 plus civilians, Dropping bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945 was a second strike response. Second strike responses are often far more deadly and consequential than the first. To my point, the highest estimation of life lost during the second strike was upwards to 200,000 people, not to mention generations that suffered and still suffer from radiation-related illnesses. The loss of life at Pearl Harbor is no laughing matter. Neither is the nuclear capabilities of nuclear armed states. So why the history lesson? Well, I tend to believe that history is prologue. It is not a perfect fit, but human beings are often predictable. Therefore, I trust the wisdom of history. This is my first suggestion to nuclear stakeholders regarding new solutions in meeting the moment. Do not mistake the advances in technology as a metric of evolved human behavior. Money, paper, pens, metal boats, the printing press were all feats of technology at one point in history. Humans are still humans, which is to say we are fallible and emotional. Time does not distort this fact. So, oftentimes, we should go back to move forward. Secondly, do not traffic in identity-based fear-mongering because it can lead to an irrational response against communities belonging to the group that is perceived as an enemy. For instance, remnants of the Red Scare and Yellow Scare are still with us. Many Americans of a certain age distrust anything Russian or Asian and still use those derogatory terms. Now, as a Black woman in this space, I am aware of the vestiges and legacies of identity-based fear. And to those who discount this as a serious national security issue, you are already doing this work wrong. Thirdly, let's rethink deterrence because the information problem can be costly when nuclear weapons are involved. Deterrence is largely a semi-informed guessing game. In other words, I think you are building weapons, therefore I must build weapons too, bigger and more deadlier. Depending on the type of regime, let's say authoritarian, this buildup comes at the expense of its citizenry. That is not to say democracies do not place burdens on their citizens too. Lastly, let peace, not domination, be the overall goal. To that end, what does a policy of peace look like in a nuclear capable world? To my mind, trust is key. In an anarchic international system, sovereignty reigns supreme, which is to say, information gathering is restricted to outsiders, costly in terms of real dollars and human life, although drone technology does its best to limit human casualties. Therefore, I believe that honest diplomacy is needed to gain and rebuild trust. Now, I know there are those who scoff at diplomacy as being a soft and ineffective tool. I disagree. There are multiple forms of diplomacy, such as coercive diplomacy, which is basically reinforcing that the carrot does indeed come with the stick. That may sound harsh, but the realities of the international system are harsh and self-interested. There are non-democratic countries fully nuclear capable and others that are getting there. The reality is we are in a strategic competition moment. The US is fighting to regain trust with partners, clients, and allies, which is to say, we are vulnerable. Now, the Biden-Harris administration is committed to reducing nuclear capabilities around the world. But there are countries uninterested in reducing nuclear capabilities and definitely uninterested in nuclear abolition. Only in buildup to increase their global profiles to be serious power players. So let's talk about the neon bright 800-pound elephant in the room, China. What can a policy of peace look like with one of our largest trading partners and at best a frenemy? There are those that think hypersonic weapons in a nuclear space are a real worry, and those that think it's overblown. In other words, there's an information and trust problem which can lead to war. How do those of us interested in a nuclear-free world advocate for a policy based in the realities of an anarchic international system? Let's go back to the Pearl Harbor example. The second strike was 10 times more destructive than the first. Anyone in my field of study knows this. So considering this is known knowledge, how powerful do we think a first strike would be 76 years later? It is this reality that all nuclear capable states must privilege in their foreign policy decision-making. Also, we are not at war. The Cold War followed two world wars, Pearl Harbor, and ran parallel to Vietnam. So what's driving today's nuclear race? In my humble opinion, domination is driving this competition. There's no other polite word to inject. So peacekeepers, how do we advocate for policies, strengthen existing treaties, and use diplomacy effectively? This is a large question with different answers depending on who's answering them. For me, I do not want our children sheltering in bunkers due to nuclear safety drills at school, quarantined from COVID, and real daily threats of gun violence have already stolen so much from them. With that in mind, I have a vision for the world, and it's truly diverse, equitable, and inclusive, where water is clean and free, education is a right and not a privilege, and global multilateral agreements such as the NPT, which turned 50 last year, and the Proliferation Security Initiative become guiding principles for all nuclear states. In my vision for the world, small power states will have more of a say at the decision-making table because they have a stake in international security too. In my vision of the world, more diverse thoughts, opinions, wisdom, experiences, and knowledge will be heard, supported, and implemented. Now, while I am a political scientist that writes in a policy space and work alongside national security practitioners on different projects, I also have a background in theology and religion. I was being trained as a chaplain and learning Arabic in Boston when the Boston bombings occurred. One day, while holding my large Arabic textbook, Al-Kitab, and wearing a head wrap, not a hijab, because it was cold, I was spit on at a bus stop in Cambridge. I tell this story not for effect, but because it reshaped my academic and professional trajectories. How? Well, someone's irrational fear drove them to commit an indecent act towards me. What's more important, they felt they had the right to because of how they perceived my identity. So let's not rush to fear because it drives us to do unthinkable things like war. Let's lean into strategic planning that privileges disarmament because security policies rooted in reactionary fear hurts all of us and does not signal progress. Let's equalize the playing field by including non-traditional voices and solutions. In closing, remember, history is a great teacher. Identity-based bias triggers irrational fear. Deterrence is flawed, and peace must be the goal through multilateral agreements and diplomacy that carries a big stick. Thank you.
Nola Haynes, thank you so much for your moving talk. Ms. Haynes' organization is the West Coast chapter of the international organization WCAPS, which stands for Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. Check them out at wcaps.org. Hi, once again, I'm Dr. Todd Sack, serving, as many of our board members do, on my PSR chapter board, Florida, and on the national board. But I'm with you now wearing the hat of the treasurer, here to stress how grateful we are to you for being part of tonight's gala and for supporting our mission through your donations and with your activism. PSR provides the health voice for preventing nuclear war and averting climate change disaster. We are here to support your activism. I hope you will go to psr.org and reach out to a staff member or board member or to Cerise Murphy, our development director, to learn how you can get involved. Whether it's adding climate change to your home or medical practice, greening your hospital, public speaking, writing a letter to the editor, or protesting, we are here to help. Finally, if you haven't already, please consider donating right now by going to psr.org/gala and click the donate button to make your credit card donation, or find our P.O. box on that page for mailing us a check. That's psr.org/gala. psr.org/gala. And thank you so much.
I want to thank each of our speakers for sharing their vision for a peaceful and thriving world. We hope our speakers have inspired you to continue supporting PSR and engaging with PSR's efforts at both the community and the national level to bring about the changes we need. Thanks for joining us tonight and supporting PSR's crucial work on both climate change and the abolition of nuclear weapons. Together, we can have a tremendous impact and can make our world a safer place for ourselves and all those we love. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and stay safe. Thank you. Welcome to PSR's Virtual Gala. We're delighted to have you here. I'm Dr. Mike Martin, President-elect of PSR. I came to my work with PSR out of my concern about climate change, a concern that I suspect you share. I'm excited to serve as the future president of PSR to help advance PSR's vital work on both climate change and the abolition of nuclear weapons. This has been an incredibly successful year for PSR, and we're excited to share with you tonight our successes and our plans for the future. We're also excited to bring you